Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about root pruning houseplants, and although some people might actually cringe at this, it can actually be really good for certain houseplants. So I'll talk about some reasons why you might want to root prune your houseplant, what to expect after the actual pruning. I do have three plants that I've recently done root pruning to, so I'll show you those with some results, and then I will find a plant that needs to be pruned, chopped up, and I'll show you the process with that too. So let's get started. There's basically two reasons why you'd want to root prune a plant like this Syngonium chiapense. One is to control the size of the plant, so chopping up a portion of the roots is good at stunting the growth. Another reason, and the reason why I did it on my Syngonium chiapense here, is because I want it to remain in this size pot. I have a small area where this plant is in my bedroom. I don't have enough space where I can continuously upsize the pot every time it gets root bound. So that's what happened with this one. The roots were basically encircling the bottom of the pot. I was starting to lose some leaves. They were starting to turn yellow and kind of dying back. So if you don't do something, like if you don't upsize it or if you don't root prune, this plant will eventually suffocate itself and die off. So I didn't have the option of upsizing it into a larger pot, so I decided to chop off the roots, and it's actually done really, really well. So those are the two reasons why you'd want to root prune a plant. So with this one in particular, like I said, it was very root bound, it was encircling the bottom of the pot, and I also did some pruning of this one here as well. So I took a number of cuttings, I think 3 separate cuttings off this plant. And one thing that was kind of unexpected, I guess, after root pruning and chopping it up, is I thought because the thickness of the stem itself is fairly thick, I thought the new growth, which actually happened really fast. Within a couple of weeks, it started pushing out a new growth point. Getting sidetracked here. I thought the new growth would remain the same sized leaf, but that's not the case. Look at how small these newer leaves are. Like compared to, whoops, I'm on my little chair here. Here's the newest leaf, here's an older leaf. Like, look at the size comparison. So that confirms that pruning these roots stunts the growth. So expect smaller leaves, I guess, or smaller growth, but it's actually growing quite vigorous. And I've probably done this, I guess I'm blocking my view here. I've probably done this maybe 3 weeks ago, and the roots are already starting to poke out the bottom. So it's responded really well with new growth and new roots, which I was kind of expecting it to go into like basically a little bit of a shock, slow the growth down, but that's not the case for this one. It's actually grown really fast. It's getting a new leaf as well, another one, and it's got this leaf here. So that's kind of surprising with this Syngonium chiapense. I'll probably have to do another root prune at some point, as well as continuously propagate this one, as it's pushing out tons of new growth. Here is where I made the prune, right there, and here is all the new growth. Here's the newest leaf, and then here's another one coming in. So it's done really good, which is kind of surprising, like I said. Now, here is my golden pothos that I did have up on my plant shelf here a number of months ago. And what happened is the plant got really, it started trailing down. It was looking super lush, looking really healthy. But slowly, as the plant became severely root bound, it was starting to lose leaves on the top of the plant. So it was really starting to thin out on top, but all the, I guess, cascading vines were doing really well. But I was having to water it quite frequently. And what I did with this plant, I'll see if I can find the video and I'll link it up in the top corner here, is I chopped it off basically to the soil line, and I did a really hard root prune as well. I cut off like half the roots, which I'll talk about that here in a second. I probably cut off a little bit more than I should have. But as you can see, everywhere I made the cut, I'm just going to bring in my light a little bit closer. You can see how nice and full this pot is getting again. And everywhere where I've made prunes, it's starting to get new growth. And the nice thing about this plant in particular, or I guess vining type plants like your philodendrons, your pothos, your scindapsus, whenever you make a cut, like if you make a prune right there, it will start to push out growth from the closest node. And sometimes it will start to branch out lower in the stem there as well. And you can see that's what happened with this one. So there's a branch right there, there's a new stem right there. So from one stem, it looks like it's branched out in multiple areas. So that's how you get a really sad dying pothos or philodendron, scindapsus, any trailing plant. If they're looking thin on top, and if you don't want to take cuttings and add cuttings into it, cut this plant up, just leave a few nodes above the soil line, and you will start to get, or it will start to regrow into a nice healthy plant. Look at all these super glossy green leaves. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm really excited about how this one responded to the aggressive pruning. I hacked it up. Like, I had tons of propagations, which I've made into more plants, some of them being up there, some are basically all over my house right now. I'm really happy with how this turned out and all the new growth. So don't be scared to prune your plants, chop them up. It's actually really good for houseplants. I know the first few times that I pruned my jade plant, and any plant in particular, I was terrified to cut it up. I thought I was going to kill it, but it actually does quite the opposite. As you can see from this plant itself, it was not thriving anymore. It wasn't looking healthy. It was getting a lot of yellow leaves. And look at it now, it looks super healthy, and I'm looking forward to this one growing into a nice luscious plant as well. So you may think you're going to kill the plant, but you actually do quite the opposite. You give it a refreshing of the roots, so to speak, and you, it responds really well to pruning as well as root pruning. So root pruning obviously is not meant for every plant. Like I said, if it's severely root bound, if you don't want to upsize it, just some of the reasons that I gave you earlier, but I don't root prune like every single plant because I want my plants to get larger leaves and I want them to grow into large plants. So if I have the space for it, I will definitely upsize it into a larger pot so that it can continue to grow. But for the ones where I have limited space, like on these plant shelves here, I can't upsize into larger pots continuously. So for those ones, I will do some root pruning. But so just be very, I guess, specific for your reasoning as to root prune them. But yeah, don't just go ahead and chop up every single plant and expect good results. Here is my global green pothos that I did a really aggressive prune on about 2 weeks ago. I'll leave that video up in the top corner here as well as a root prune, and you can see it is getting a bunch of new branches, new stems popping out in a number of areas. So you can see right here, this node is starting to put out a growth point, and so is this one. New growth everywhere. So I'm really excited about this one as well. I have many propagations down in my little propagation spot over there, which I'm rooting in water. Actually, I'll go grab them. Here's one container of the propagations. You can see they're all getting some new roots. So the plan for these guys, once they are large enough, which it's probably pretty close, I want to put all of those cuttings into one pot to make another nice full pot of global green pothos for myself. And then I'll put it somewhere in my house. So this is a nice, easy way to make more houseplants from the ones that you have for free, essentially. I'm really happy with how these 3 experiment plants turned out. Nothing in regards to the care has changed. These 2 are still in my basement window receiving the same amount of light. I water them the same as I would any other pothos. This one's up in my bedroom. And yeah, they've done really well. I should actually mention that when I first chopped up this one, like pruned it and did the root prune, it did lose a few more leaves after the fact. So I don't know if it was just a continuation of the current leaves dying off or if it was because of maybe a little bit of shock to the plant. But it's bounced back really well. It's looking really healthy. I'm happy with how it turned out. So maybe expect some leaf loss, but don't panic. Just continue to give it the right care. Be patient, give it time, and it will respond nicely with some new leaves and some new growth. These are fun little projects for me just to see how far I can push the plants and how they respond to my pruning and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna go around my collection here. It's probably not gonna be hard, but I'm gonna find a plant that needs to be root pruned. I think there was one up here on my plant shelf that, again, I can't upsize it, but it was growing out the bottom. Or the roots were growing out the bottom. So I'm gonna grab one of those, remove it from the pot, chop it up, show you how to do it, and we'll go from there. Here is a larger neon pothos. These are all propagated cuttings from the mother plant that I took probably about a year ago. It's starting to lose a few leaves, like here's some yellow leaves. That is the first sign that the plant is root bound, and I'm having to water it quite frequently. So look at the bottom, I can see roots poking through. So I'm guessing this one is going to be root bound. It has not been repotted since I planted it. I'm going to take it out and just have a peek here. See what these roots look like. And try and keep it all. Actually, not bad. Not bad. I'm going to find a different plant. Let's take a look at a different one. This one is definitely root, like it can be repotted. It's not severely root bound like I want it to. So I'm going to go find a different plant here. Okay, here is a better one. I kind of cheated and took this one out of the pot, so it is root bound, so I'll show you here in a second. This one, same thing. It's starting to lose a few leaves. They're starting to yellow, and this one I'm having to water it quite frequently as well. Let's take it out of the pot and see what we got. So this is a root bound pothos. You can see it's encircling the pot. I'm having to water it a lot. It's not retaining that moisture in the soil long enough that the roots can soak it up. The roots are drying and the plant is throwing a little bit of a fit and it's dumping some leaves. Now where I have this, I have it upstairs in my living room on my plant shelf. Again, I don't have it's not a large enough area that I can keep upsizing this pot. So I'm going to keep it in this pot and I'm going to show you how I'm going to prune the roots. So for this cut, I'm actually using a utility knife. This is one that I use only for plants. I don't chop up anything else outside. I want a nice sharp edge so that I have a nice clean cut and not something where I'm just hacking up through the roots where it has uneven cuts or maybe multiple cuts in certain areas. I want to take a nice clean cut so those roots can heal properly. Now I can't remember if I had a comment on Instagram or if it was on one of my previous YouTube videos. I can't find it, but I remember a subscriber or someone commenting that if you do a root prune, you should also prune the plant as well, upwards of like 30% of the leaves, I think. Don't quote me on that. I can't find it in any literature online, but when you do root prune a plant, you should remove at least some of the foliage or branches so that it doesn't stress out the plant too much. So I'm actually going to do that as well after I do the root prune. Now for the pruning itself, like pruning of the roots, I think there's a number of different ways and it can be different for certain plants. So if you have a like a ficus plant or like a ficus lasca, fiddle-leaf fig, that sort of thing, they have larger roots and smaller roots, and forgive me, I can't remember them right now. I should have had them written down. Okay, I actually just looked it up. Tap roots are the larger roots. Try not to cut those ones, and thread roots are the thinner ones. You can chop those up. But with pothos plants and like any vining type plant, they all have essentially the same size roots, so I am just going to slice this up. I don't have to worry about any tap roots or thread roots. I think. I'm not an expert, I'm just a hobbyist, so don't quote me on that. But if you've ever taken a like ficus plant out of its pot, you'll notice it has like really thick, really thick roots, and then you'll have those thread roots, which, yeah, you'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever taken them out. I don't know how to explain it any further. Okay, so back to pruning this. When you are root pruning, you shouldn't take anything more than 1/3 of the root system, and that's what I'm gonna do with this. So something like that, and I'm just gonna slice it up like it's a piece of cake. Okay, maybe that's a little bit more than 1/3, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it. Just cut it into it like that. And again, just a nice clean cut. You got a nice little root patty, and then you're left with this remaining clump of plant. So now, when you go to repot it, I'm going to add some fresh soil in the bottom. That will kind of rejuvenate these roots. They'll grow into the soil and it can remain in this pot. So I just added a little bit of soil into the bottom of this pot. I'm not using anything fancy, it's just a Pro Mix as well. It is their premium potting mix, so I guess it is kind of fancy. And then I'm just going to plunk this guy in the pot, just like that. Just so it's at the same level that it was. Now it has some soil for the roots to grow down into, search out for that moisture, and it should do good. Okay, now I am going to prune this one as well. So I'm going to cut back maybe to right here. So I got a nice section of new golden pothos. Yeah, this one's the golden. Got a new section like that. And this one, look at it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Look at this newest leaf. I love the variegation. I'm going to cut this one back almost to the edge of the pot here. So I got a nice section of cutting like that. Now I probably got maybe a dozen single node cuttings that I can make into an entirely new plant just from chopping this one up. I think, and I'm going to do this one right here too. I'm going to cut this one back up here like that as well. So I have a little bit kind of spilling over the edge. Actually, I'm going to cut this one too, just so, like that. Just so those vines aren't hanging over the edge of the pot. Now, one important thing to do before I wrap this up is I'm going to thoroughly water this plant, just giving those roots a nice good soaking as well as the soil, because this plant definitely needed to be watered. I probably should have watered it maybe yesterday, but that's okay, because after you do a prune like that, make sure you give it a good thorough watering. If you do any reading online about root pruning, there's lots of information out there. And like I said, one of the things that is mentioned after you do the root pruning, just make sure you give it some water. But a lot of literature out there says to give it fertilizer as well. But you have to be cautious with that, because if you're putting it in fresh soil, specifically commercial made soil, you have to be aware that a lot of commercial made soils already have fertilizer in it. So this one in particular, the premium potting mix, has fertilizer or nutrients in it that lasts up to 9 months. So you don't have to give this newly potted plant any extra fertilizer, because it already has fertilizer in the soil mixed in. It's basically a slow release fertilizer, I think. So if you give it extra fertilizer, you have the potential to burn the roots, and then obviously that's not good for the plant. So just be a little cautious, read the packaging of your soil, just to see if it has any type of fertilizer in the potting mix. I actually had a question about the root patty from one of my other videos, and someone asked, can you just plant this and will it regrow into a new stem? Unfortunately, for these types of plants, you do need a section of the stem in order for new growth to reappear. So this is useless. So just huck it in the garbage, put it in the compost, whatever you need to do. You do need a section of the stem, specifically a section of the node where it has aerial roots. I do have many propagation videos out there if you want to go check it out. But no, you can't just replant the root patty and have it regrow. It's essentially useless. You need the stem. I sprayed the plant off. I gave it a good thorough watering. It's looking absolutely gorgeous. I'll provide some updates with this one down the road. And then look at the pile of cuttings it was actually all golden pothos cuttings. So the golden pothos vines did really, really well, but I can now make an entirely new pot of golden pothos, which I'll be propagating these in water. So yeah, this is an awesome project to not only get more plants, but rejuvenate the ones that you currently have in your collection. I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. I really appreciate the support. I hope you like this video. Take care, everyone. Bye.